Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast, YouTube blog, and radio station from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Today we're taking up our European binoculars and looking at the whole European startup landscape in another installation of the European Startup House together with Thomas from Munich. Hey, how you doing?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Totally my pleasure. He just had to go over to his colleagues and tell them to turn off the PlayStation and we don't have any background noise. And therefore, I would like to welcome you to the podcast for decision makers and researchers in the European startup landscape. We are, I do believe, the only podcast that really takes a bird's eye view on a regular basis on the European startup scene. Thomas, now that you had something like 10 espressos here, can you give us a little introduction what we will be talking about today?
Yes, thank you for having me again. We will be diving into a particular topic today. We're looking at academic spin-offs. And especially in Europe, this has been a topic that has been more and more in the focus of debate. Of course, since ever, spin-offs are a backbone of technological startups. We do see a lot of startups coming from universities, from research organizations since the early days already. But the debate is heating up on this topic. We see with the EIC Accelerator, with the Horizon funding and the kicks, the EIT kicks that are working in Europe to support spin-offs. As well as on the individual university landscape, you see that there's a lot of effort to bring more spin-offs into the market. And yeah, I think that is reason enough for us to have a look at this phenomenon and see what the scope and the actual impact of it is.
Yes, we may tell our audience that Germany is pretty good in researching. For example, with the German Institute for Artificial Intelligence, we do have one of the largest research institutions for AI in the world. Plus, what many people don't know, there is a German guy called Karl-Heinz Brandenburg. He invented something you may have heard of. It's called MP3 and was developed here in Germany in Fraunhofer Institute, but actually they never made a lot of money with it. So therefore, even the politicians realized, there's something we need to do. We need to help spin-off startups where, for example, we had already a lot in terms of physics, STEM, and biotechnology here. Can you put this a little bit into perspective, how important this is in the European startup scene?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you mentioned already a very interesting example, the MP3 that came out of Fraunhofer. Fraunhofer actually is one of the strongest, let's say, research centers that produces spinouts. I'm actually not so sure that the MP3 was such a commercial failure. I think there's more of a licensing agreement behind it and there's some income. But I'm also not an expert, but that's what I heard, that it's maybe a myth that there was no revenue from this at all. But it's true that Fraunhofer is one of the, if not the strongest European research organization producing spinouts. And yeah, spinouts have a huge potential. No? So especially if you look at let's say the growth over time, the technological show good resilience. They are not like, let's say, a delivery marketplace, a delivery startup where maybe you have high investments in the beginning, but then it dies out. Not technological startups, they have this backbone that can give them a life that lasts longer than the next marketing hype. And yeah, so spin-offs are really a big hope for not only the commercial success and the economic benefit for the region, but also for making a change in the society, making a change in, let's say, for example, environmental aspects, climate tech. So also for the better of the world, these spin-offs are an important pillar of where we want to take this in Europe.
if you're watching this on YouTube right now, we should hint at two different interviews we did. One of them is a spin-off in terms of physics that enables reproducible nanostructures. And the other one we just did recently, it's with a biotech entrepreneur. She is regularly a professor at the university, but spun off a biotech startup where she hopes to help a lot of patients with blood cancer in order to help to get more people to transplantation and have no or very mild effects of the transplantation and accepting of the foreign body tissues. That is, for example, two like very deep technology topics that we've talked about in the past. Thomas, I'll hand over to you after some trivia from my side.
Very good. No, and it's exciting always to look at the various companies that are using like technology that was developed in research and academia. I mean, one of the most famous ones that we've been all witnessing in the past years was BioNTech. That was from Mainz, the city of Mainz, and it was spun out of the University of Mainz. Two professors, also a couple. They did create this, but there's a whole academic, let's say, academic/commercial ecosystem around the university there, where a lot of postdoctoral and doctoral scientists are working on the RNA technology and trying to develop new use cases with it and create new companies with it. So it's very exciting to look at these different examples and see how they can potentially change the world, if you will. But of course, there's also a higher risk in spin-outs than in let's say, in an internet startup. You see now here my screen. And so what we want to do today is we want to explore the academic spin-off landscape in Europe. And first of all, what are we talking about? There's two definitions that we just want to quickly look at. There's the spin-offs that are an independent company created through the sale of a parent company's business or division shares. So it would be a spin-off from a company versus an academic spin-off, which would be formed out of the commercialization of research outcomes, for example, by giving a patent to the company or a license to the patent or similar. So we are now focusing on the academic spin-offs. Now, there's, of course, a lot of spin-offs from the corporate world, but they are usually less important, let's say, when we speak about startups, because they already start with more capital and more market access from day one. So the academic spin-off is what we're interested in. There is some data on it. It's not the easiest, I would say, to map out the development of spin-offs in the world. But here there's a source, a report that's called Global University Venturing, that gives us a global perspective and also breaks it down by country. So you see here that the US in yellow over the years has been the biggest contributor to the global spin-off market. And you see also a big surge of this in the years 2020, 21. And in 2022, it still was above the 2020 level and pre-COVID levels.
Mm-hmm. The most famous non-academic spin-off that I could think of was, for example, Expedia, which was actually founded as a division of Microsoft back in 1996.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Okay. Very nice, very nice. This way around, it works also at Microsoft. Microsoft buys a lot of startup companies, but sometimes there's also a spin-out maybe. I think they also had like a nice spin-out in the gaming sector with gaming computers. I think that was also a spin-out. I forgot the name now. But yeah, sometimes that works as well. Great. I mean, you see also here the importance of the UK and also Germany popping up quite dominantly in this statistic. It's, I think, together with Switzerland, is one of the places that is highlighted here. Not at all at the level of the US, but also these comparisons are always a bit unfair. Now, if you compare US to Germany, probably you should be comparing Europe the EU versus the US, that would be a bit fairer. But still, even if you compare now, if put together the rest of the world with Germany, you would not reach the level of the US in terms of the investments that Spinoffs received.
Mm-hmm.
But very interesting, the surge and the increase of spin-off funding over the last years. As I said, there is a shift. If you remember maybe 10 years ago when someone proposed a hardware startup, basically investors would not react, would not be interested to that at all, right? It's a new phenomenon that hardware and high tech are now in the eyes of the investors are an opportunity. Has to do with a shift in the public investment as well, I think.
Maybe it's also since NVIDIA has shown how important hardware can be to have the right hardware.
Yes, I mean, NVIDIA is really a case where you can see that there's a margin of innovation that you can achieve in hardware, and that there's only a few companies that can actually compete in this. Also, you know the story of ASML in the Netherlands, that is the chip manufacturer that produces the machines for the chip manufacturers. Now, this is like a sole competitor in its space. Almost no other company can compete with them. And so the whole world is dependent on their machines. And it was also a spin-out, if I remember correctly. Now, this is a spin-out of the TU Eindhoven or Philips. I'm not sure, one of those. They're very closely connected, Philips and the Technical University in Eindhoven. And when ASML was founded, it came out of this complex.
Mm-hmm. And we're now talking about the academic spin-off worldwide by category. And you have here a very nice chart. Everybody who's listening to this, go down here in the show notes. There is a link to the show notes, and they will have a link to the report. But health and tech make up around 77% across the world. Do you have, like, even if not valid data, like rule of thumb, how much this may make up in Europe?
You mean how much funding, or?
My understanding is what we're seeing here is just a count of the companies by sector. And do you have an idea what the business mix would look like if you look straight at EU European institutions? Would you guesstimate it's about the same?
Yes, it's hard to get this data now on all levels. So we do not have now a breakdown in the analysis on a European level, but we have here a worldwide. We can assume that this would be similar. What is very, let's say, striking is the strong health aspect. Health is really a sector in which we see a lot of spin-offs. And then you have hardware with 34%, and you have 23% materials. So this is really a large part falls into these sectors. And I mean, you don't even see any other sectors in this analysis. So it's quite striking that the spin-offs are operating in let's say, classical technology sectors, mostly health and hardware. And you would not see a spin-off, for example, in software, because there is no IP behind, no patent behind. So it would not be categorized as a classical spin-off where you have the transfer of technology inscribed in a patent, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, here we look at Europe and how the debate has changed. Now, this is the news mentions of the word spin-off or similar words in the European debate. So we always like to approach topics by their attention and interest. And you can see that in 2020, 21, 22, it was not so popular, or was not so many articles discussing spin-offs. As we saw, it is mainly the health sector, it is mainly the hardware sector, and that was maybe not the focus of the startup scene. And only in 2022, this started to change, and there was a drastic increase of attention to the topic. And you see that coincides also with the revamping of the EIC Accelerator that definitely has set itself that goal to support the spin-offs and their market entry. In Germany, for example, the Unternehmertum is one of the entrepreneurship centers based at a university, the Technical University in Munich, where it's supporting also spin-offs. And this is a model that Germany tries to replicate in 10 more universities, so-called startup factories. So these are developments that are now taking shape. And basically all policy debate points into the direction that deep tech really is a solution to many problems. Competitiveness of the continent, climate change, these challenges that could also be solved technologically. A lot of policy debate is pointing in that direction. And so the hopes are high.
And of course, everybody who would like to learn more about Unternehmertum, go down here in the show notes. There's a link to our interview with them.
Very good.
Very good. Actually, if we go on to the next slide, I also do have some advertisement. For example, I just scanned through it. It's a big screenshot with a lot of different names, and just scanning through it, I found a CO2 BioClean where we already had an interview with them as one of the examples of the spin-off. So we also take some examples from there who do have a really interesting solution to turn CO2 into replacements for plastic, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so this is a screenshot, really just a partial screenshot of the 526 companies that the EIC Accelerator has supported. So the EIC fund, to be correct, now there's the EIC Accelerator as one of the forms, and the EIC fund has several different possibilities to support startups through loans and investments. And you can see that they have been active at least until June 23, where the last, I think this is the last big round that was announced. You see sorted by different funding dates here, the portfolio the EIC fund has invested with the mission to support more spinouts. So I can only assume that all of these are spinouts. I haven't looked through all of them individually, but since the tech transfer of the EIC Accelerator has a focus on tech transfer, most of them probably are spinouts.
Yes, my understanding is not necessarily every time the complete university is involved with a stake, but it's basically people doing the research, getting out and really applying it.
Yes. So yes, I mean, spinouts have this. If it's a spinout, the university needs to be involved because the university has an ownership of the IP in some sort. Otherwise, it wouldn't be technically a spinout. So in this, in this regard, you would be having an involvement by the tech transfer office in the startup that would say, okay, we license you the patent that the university owns, or we sell you the patent, and this can be done in exchange for equity. This is a new development, really, as well. So if you look at how this was done in Europe over history, it was very different. In most European countries, you would have had a situation where the ownership of IP was directly with the professor previously, so the university had no say in it. If a professor was developing a new invention, a new technology, it would be their own property, and if they did something with it or not was their own business. That was changed by a couple of regulations that were taken into effect in all the European countries by now. So in most of them, the ownership structure of IP is now with the university. So the university itself owns the inventions of their professors, like an employee would not own the IP of an invention, they make it work. It's the same at a university. And this way, the universities really work on tech transfer, and they have opened these tech transfer offices that support the commercialization of this IP. It has an advantage. No? So the advantage is that more IP is being commercialized. There's more attempts, and there's a wider group of people at the university who could think about commercializing this IP that the university owns. Before, it was really the question if the professor wants it or not, and more often the decision was not. So that's why spin-offs really increase if the ownership is at the university level. That's at least what we see in the cases where this was done. For example, Cambridge is, I think, the role model for the European universities. They have changed this in the, I think, in the 80s, and since then have seen like a surge of spin-outs of the Cambridge University.
Mm-hmm. I see. And from all the data I've been reading, also ETH, Eidgenössische Technische Hochschule, is a Swiss technical university. They are also doing pretty well.
Yes, we will have a statistic later on where we see that in Europe, ETH Zurich is one of the strongest players. So in Switzerland, you have a strong university scene, very good universities, and therefore also very high quality spin-outs. I must say, I think in Switzerland with the ownership, it's a bit different. I'm not an expert now on Swiss university law, but I think in Switzerland, actually, that would be, they still have the old system, if I'm not mistaken, where the professor owns the IP.
Okay. And let's get a little bit to the examples. You brought two examples, one of them from Zurich and one of them from Grenoble.
Yes. So these are just two examples that are also that show how successful these spinouts can become. Now here from Switzerland, you have Climeworks, which is a direct air capture and storage technology. They have raised $650 million in April 2022. So these are really large rounds. Now these are already these mega rounds where we often say in Europe they don't happen often enough. That is why companies leave Europe and move to the US, and you don't get these kind of rounds in Europe. So that proves this wrong. Now we see that spinouts in Europe can achieve this. It's not the European Union in this case; it is Switzerland. So maybe that's a little bit disappointing to the EU here, but it is at least possible on the continent to raise these kind of amounts for a spinout. And there's also examples for European-based ones. Now think of Northvolt in Sweden that raises billions in funding, which is not an academic spinout, I think, but is also a high-tech company. So we do see these kind of rounds happening in Europe, and also probably in deep tech you have a bit of a location advantage because once the infrastructure for the technology has been created, be it the laboratories in the health sector, biotech sector, or be it the factories in the energy space, then you cannot move that easily anymore. So there's a bit of a lock-in effect. And so deep tech has a bit of this retention effect that successful technologies, successful startups don't leave to the US necessarily.
Mm-hmm. I see. So basically, you first have to be successful with one very good startup, and then you basically build kind of a launch pad for other startups to take off there as well.
I think that this is very well possible. No? I think that around these ecosystems that are based around the technology and the infrastructure that this technology needs, more spinouts can happen. Well, I definitely think that when the ingredients are coming together, you will see repetitive success. No?
Let me use my fortune teller abilities here and tell you are advising companies and authorities on something like that, maybe?
So it could be, yes. So the ecosystem development is one of our core capacities. Now, so we're building ecosystems. We're supporting players that want to create these hubs that drive repetitive and continuous success in startups. And I think that's really the big challenge. Now, you can get lucky one time. No, that's easy, but to make it repeatable and to make sure that more entrepreneurs start something in your ecosystem, that's not easy.
Well, luck is one time, and if you can do it 5 times, you have a winning system.
Yes, or even more. Yeah. And like one of the elements that we are highlighting here is, for example, the regional differences alone in Europe. Now, if you see Horizon Europe funding, everyone talks about Horizon Europe, no? And it says that this is
Thomas, for everybody who doesn't know Horizon, I've heard of it, admittedly, but can you give our audience like a very tiny introduction to the Horizon program and why we're seeing it here?
Of course, yes. So the Horizon Europe funding is a program. It's a research funding program from the European Union for universities and innovation actors in Europe to turn research into commercial success. So it is a huge program. I think it started with almost 100 billion in funding for over 7 years. So 2021 to 2027. It is based on a long-term strategy. So before Horizon Europe, there was Horizon 2020, which was another 7-year framework where the EU gave a large amount of research funding into the universities. And it's really one of the engines that drives R&D in Europe and helps to create new companies, creates new technologies, also in the form of patents and licenses that are given out. There's also basic research being done that will only in the future be commercialized, and so far only stays inside, let's say, the walls of the universities. But it's the big funding for research in Europe. So startups can directly participate in this since Horizon 2020. So it's also an increasing factor in the startup landscape. And a lot of universities are using this funding to develop ecosystems around their campus for more startup and innovation from the university.
What actually surprised me that Paris is leading charge here. Europe, yes, Munich, of course, it is there. Paris was a little bit a surprise, as well as the next ones, Barcelona, Madrid, and Brussels. We always do have Amsterdam on the screen. We always do have Berlin as big startup hubs there. But Paris, apparently, they're doing a little bit something different here.
Yes, this is very, very interesting, and I must say that you don't see this analysis often. I think it's overlooked that there is a competition for research funding as well, and especially with the innovation focus now with startups and so on. You need to be well positioned, and you need to know how to tap into these resources. And there's a huge difference between the regions. And with this statistic here, you can see it with a blink of your eye. Now you see that there is cities that receive 1.4 billion, Paris, and then there are cities that receive here in the top 10 only 400 million. And then there's, of course, cities that don't have access to these funds at all today. They might be having only 10 million. And since this is funding by Europe for the European constituents, it's fair. It's fair. So the competition is fair. You can apply and win it. But apparently some cities specialize, some actors in these cities. It's not the city, it's not the municipality applying. It is the universities in this place. It is the startups in this place, etc. But definitely you see a regional competition. And that doesn't have to be that unbalanced, I would say. I find it shocking, to be honest.
if I condense this a little bit, that means there are a handful of actors in each of those cities, usually advisors, consultants who help and specialize in helping to file those applications, and basically they are more successful than others.
Yes, you have consultants there, but I think that it's mainly the institutions that are well positioned to capture these fundings. So universities have people working there that would write these applications, support startups to write these applications. Regions would have like support organizations that would support you. It's not only commercial consultants that would be winning those grants. No, it's mostly the institutions that open up these opportunities for their startups, for their researchers. And some are doing a better job here and others are falling behind. And since this is, I think, also an objective by the European Union to have this equally spread, I think this is a huge problem that it's not that equal.
And you also brought us an analysis from academic research into practical application, where you have a little bit the most successful institutions who are doing this as of the time of the data. I'm not sure when it is, but usually if you have that kind of aggregation of data, it's usually 1 or 2 years old. And it appears that ETH Zurich and the Free University and the Technical University of Berlin are very successful there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Swiss universities, if they applied for Horizon funding, it was before Switzerland stepped out of Horizon. At the moment, Switzerland is not part. The UK re-entered into it. So these data that we are looking at is the funding that started 2021 until today. This is pretty recent, so this funding would be until the end of 2023 probably, and you would not see the UK and Switzerland being on top here because they both were excluded from Horizon funding in the last year. Now UK is back, so I would expect the UK cities and universities to increase in the ranking again in the traditional, let's say, data, the historical data from Horizon 2020, when the UK was still part of it. They had top spots as well. Now they were out. They missed out on this opportunity.
But there's also the JTH, Royal Institute of Technology, in there. I haven't heard of them before. Can you elaborate a little bit on them?
Yes. So here this is not looking at the funding now. This is now looking at the spin-offs. And you see that the European institutions that have the most spin-offs, we have looked at 2 different sources here because getting data is tricky. Is very tricky. So one source is Dealflow. Dealflow is a collaboration between Dealroom and the European Commission, where they track all of the public funding that went through Horizon and other means into university-based innovations. Might be spin-outs or licensed, etc. And they count, when you look at the institutions there, so they count most of the supported innovations by an individual institution in Zurich. And then followed by the Royal Institute of Technology, JTH, which is in the UK. And I assume I'm also not an expert, I must apologize. I don't know exactly how it is set up, but I would assume this is also one of the overarching national research institutes like we have in Germany, the Fraunhofer or the Helmholtz or Leibniz Institute. So Max Planck, maybe that's very famous internationally. So I would assume that this is a similar setup. It's followed by the Free University of Berlin and the Technical University of Berlin, which I would say this is an interesting data set, but I assume there is a mismatch in terms of different funding sources that might also come from national sources and where more spin-outs might be produced than this graph on the left shows, because this is based on the European funding. On the right side, we reference a study that Fraunhofer did themselves, where they compared European national research organizations with the US system. And they did a review of spin-outs they could identify. And they looked at the numbers 2017 to 2019, so probably a smaller cut. And here you see that especially these German PROs, they are called here, research organizations. I think that I forgot what the P, maybe public research organizations, stands for. And you see that, for example, Fraunhofer is the individual research organization that is ranked highest in Germany with 81 spin-outs. And I'm not sure, but I think CNRS, is that a French one? I'm not 100% sure, but I think that could be a French system. And then the University of California system ranks 287, ranks first with 287 spin-outs. So you see a bit the magnitude, and this would not show on the left now, because it is a bit of a different perspective, different data collection. So both are probably to be taken with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm. I see. Plus, you are also talking about Death Valley, also the so-called Valley of Death with us in those spin-offs, because they not all survive, and there's a very tricky phase in there growing up.
Yes, so I mean, you can imagine how deep tech and deep tech startups and high tech from research, they have an even higher risk of failing than the, let's say, usual internet startup, SaaS startup, if you will. So the initial costs are much higher. And if you are not able to raise these initial costs through grants or investments, then you have you will fail right away, because you are lacking the technology, you're lacking the laboratories, the access to the materials you might need. So there's a much longer phase and a much more expensive phase of research and development before you can actually go to the market. Now, if you create a SaaS startup, basically you could create the software within a very short time. And with the right investment, you just need the personal cost of the developers. You get the tool up and running. You get first customers, first income, and then you grow through iterations and improve the product as you go. Maybe you work with discounts in the beginning. Now you make it, but you go to the market and there's money coming in also from revenue. While on the research and development side, you don't have that option. Now you have not this avenue of going out with a smaller version of your product. Basically, a less ready technology is more difficult to bring to the market. So you need to be able to finalize the research and development and bring it to the market once it's ready. And for this long period, you need the funding, and you will not get the funding all at once. You will have to repeatedly go for fundraising as well. And that's why also midway you can fail. You might have achieved half of your progress, and then you don't find any follow-on funding because you transition maybe from grants towards venture capital, and that doesn't work out. There can be many, many issues that can prevent you from succeeding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. And especially the phase where you spin out before you really achieve commercialization, before you really could sell your product. That's the very important part, because then it is too commercial for the university and too risky for the VCs. How do the startups usually fund themselves during that time? To saving from the entrepreneur?
I think that is, again, an avenue that's not so available. No? So because the costs are too high, you cannot go through a route of family, friends, and fools. now it's too expensive to fund it yourself. So you're really stuck with these, let's say, institutional players. Now you need to convince. Most of the time in the beginning, you will apply for commercialization grants. So I think that is in Europe at least very well established at this point. You can win different funding schemes now from the local to national, even European level. And then you will be able to develop your solution in the R&D phase. Of course, you need to win that, no? But I think that's an established way to try that. After that, you have the transition to the real market, if you will. No? So you develop something in R&D, and then the transfer to commercially oriented VCs might be tricky, because if you have not adopted their mindset beforehand, you might have a bit of a culture shock. Now you come as a researcher with a great new technology, you're thinking about how to perfectionize it, and then you are confronted with the market realities that a VC has top of their mind. There's a culture clash, you might not be a fit, and that might lead to you not raising any VC funding.
Mm-hmm. I see. So that's basically the part where you could really screw up your startup. Out of curiosity, I'm sure you don't have the data there yet. What do the founders do who try to spin off their startup and then fail? Are they going back to academia?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I think there is a big group of researchers, PhDs, postdocs that try out this route. Now, there is, it's also attractive because once you win a commercialization grant for a couple of years, you will usually have an income. Now, you will usually have your stable income that's maybe even a bit better than your salary as a PhD candidate. So it's an attractive route to take and to spend a couple of years in. And once you try to go into the commercial side of things, you feel like maybe I'm not so entrepreneurial after all. I don't like a situation where I don't have any salary. And then you realize that you're not really an entrepreneur and you give up and you go back into academic life or work for a company to earn a salary. So I do think we're seeing a lot of these kind of behaviors. It's also normal. It's also what you need to create. Now you need to create that appetite, that volume, not to have in the end also those that are the hidden gems, the pearls inside, that are entrepreneurial, that really get the taste of it and want to grow a business and want to take the risk of starting a company. Those are the ones that you actually want now as a society, but you will have a lot of them that are, let's say, just, testing the waters, playing around, learning about the opportunity, and maybe realizing it's not for them. Now, I just wanted to say those that are entrepreneurs, I would say after you tried once, probably you would be looking for another opportunity, either joining another startup or trying again with something else. I feel that once the bug got you probably want to continue.
Mm-hmm. I see. So since there's a value of that, there's an opportunity to fail. Is spin-off always the best option?
Yes, that's a good question as well. So it's not the only option. So commercialization of technology can take different forms. So the tech transfer offices have traditionally different services under their portfolio. So they can, if you're a researcher, you have an invention and you go to your university's tech transfer office, they would explain you different options and would say, yes, if you want to commercialize this, you can go for licensing. You can go for maybe just selling it as a consultancy, as knowledge transfer. Communication could be also something that you go for, just trying to let the world know that this is there, this technology is there, and that people can build something new based on it. So there's different options of bringing technology out there in the world. And a lot of universities really see that academic mission as more important than the commercial mission. So while they own the IP, not every university feels an obligation to earn money with the IP. So also they see the academic process progress, and they see that this technology can help society as something more important, and they would maybe give it away also as a open license. They might give it away as partnerships that the university can do. So that's to be kept in mind. Now, universities are not commercial entities that try to maximize profit. However, when you are interested in the commercial side of things, then you can definitely think about the Spinout. There is also the possibility to collaborate with venture studios, work with corporates that want to create something new and can incorporate these technologies from universities in their spinouts that they create inside the corporate, or even just a new product that's developed inside the corporate. So there's definitely a lot of possibilities for the university and the researcher to see their technology being taken up and going outside of, let's say, the lab and go into the real world. Doesn't always have to be a startup.
You also brought some examples for the real world in terms of how many people are actually employed by some of those spin-offs. Once again, the example of Cambridge, because I do believe that's very well published.
Yes. So Cambridge is really like a case study that you can refer to when you look at tech transfer, because in continental Europe, or close to continental Europe, the UK was the first ones to change the laws of the IP ownership, and they have established the tech transfer office that's called Cambridge Enterprise. And basically now they have 100 employees around about, of which 24 are in commercialization. Now you see already here commercialization is a part of the activity, and not everything is focused on the commercial uptake. And if you compare, so Cambridge is one of the best, let's say. Now that they have the highest numbers of spinouts, they have the most successful spinouts as well. Now, if you compare the knowledge transfer offices, KTOs as they are called, in this study that we look at here, then you see that 60% of the KTOs in Europe have less than half of the employees as Cambridge Enterprise. So there's really a gap. So most of the KTOs have only half of the employees, and the median is 5 to 10. Median number of employees in the tech transfer offices is 5 to 10. So we definitely see there's a gap, not just by how well equipped tech transfer offices are, and then they can of course not support as many spin outs and as many processes as they can in Cambridge. Question is a bit how serious we take tech transfer. Now, if we say we have a team with 5 people at a university, do we take it serious? Do we really think that's something that the university is actively pursuing? No?
Yeah, so I was wondering if it makes sense to have at first do everything with a small team of people and have 1 or 2 successful spin-offs that then will lead you to get more people into this department, or likely, as Cambridge did it, slowly grow over time and get more people with more knowledge. Not really sure if it would help a university to just hire 100 employees and say you're now going to do spin-offs.
Yeah, well, you probably need to hire the people that can build up such a entrepreneurship center or KTO effectively. So it's not that these are unknown concepts or processes. It's really a bit the speed of the adoption to this concept. Do I accept this as a role of my university? Do I see my university being responsible for tech transfer? Or do I feel like we should stay in the scientific space and I don't want tech transfer? And I guess often this conflict that is a real conflict in the universities remains unresolved, and you get these, sorry for my French, half-assed approaches where you have like a small tech transfer team that is not equipped and is not ready to really support spin-outs, but are doing something and are probably very nice people with a lot of passion and a personal effort, but they cannot change the realities of the infrastructure and the realities of the university if they are not supported in with the right strategy.
I see. Because we had to do a restart for several reasons, and we have a few pieces that we need to cut out. So we're recording for almost 55 minutes. We're actually a little bit over our original meeting schedule. Do you have any final closing words where people can learn more and reach out to you guys?
Yes, we made it to the last slide, actually. So, I would say if you're interested in the topic, connect with us via deepecosystems.com or the Startup Heat Map, where you see our publications. And feel free to reach out. We are talking a lot about spinouts and the development of the university-based ecosystems in Europe. So definitely join the conversation and connect with us.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thomas, looking forward to do the next recording with you. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.